Now that we've gotten to learn about loops and explore different types of loops and get three favorite numbers from our user for us to be able to put together an inventory for them, let's actually explore what it is going to take to implement that inventory. Well, for an inventory, what would be really useful is knowing how to use an array. Now, an array is essentially a collection of values that we store in a variable. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's put an array for our inventory here by our stats. So we're going to declare a variable, as usual, called inventory, and we're going to assign it a value of these two brackets. Now, what does that mean? Well, this is an empty array, meaning that it doesn't contain anything. However, we could put any number of values in here, such as a red potion and a blue potion. So now this is a collection of the strings red potion and blue potion, and we can access these values that are within the array through a reference to inventory now. But we'll get to more detail on that later. For now, we're just going to be assigning that empty array. So let's add a function for adding items to our inventory based on our favorite numbers between 0 and 10. I'm going to declare a function called addItem that is going to take an item number. And here we're going to declare a variable to hold the new item in. And then we're going to use a switch statement on the item number. For 1, we're going to give them an iron sword. For 2, we are going to give them a rusty shield. For 3, we are going to give them a brand new fork. We're getting really creative with these. And by the way, feel free to come up with whatever items you want and totally get creative with what's actually in here. For 4, we're going to give them a red potion. Remember the break statement after each of these cases. For 5, we're going to give them a blue potion. For 6, we are going to give them an interesting lizard. For 7, we are going to give them Snowball the rabbit. For 8, we are going to give them Father's Lost Notebook. If you're using single quotes like I am, make sure to escape a single quote that you're using as an apostrophe for fathers. And for 9, we're going to give Mother's homemade lasagna. Alright, so now that we have our switch statement, that gives us an item for each number between 0 and 10. We are going to put the new item that we've just assigned the value to into our inventory. And we're going to do that with inventory dot push new item. Now, what is this? Well, inventory being an array has access to certain functions that are available to all arrays that allow us to essentially operate on the items within that array or to work with that array in some fashion. There are different data types in JavaScript like an array or a string that have different built-in functions, or you could call them methods. We'll get to exactly what the difference is between those later. In order to work with them. So in this case, to add something new to the end of the array, we use push. If we wanted to, say, remove something, we would use pop. So now that we have items that we can add to our inventory, we're going to go up to where we're getting our favorite numbers. And when you get a valid number, we're going to add the item corresponding to the favorite number to our inventory. That's pretty simple, huh? So now that that's done, let's create the ability to actually use an item. So down here in our input processing function, let's go ahead and collapse all these cases so it's a little bit easier to look at. Let's add a case for use sword. Now we could do a couple interesting things here. We can add a tag for taking out your pose, or I should say, sorry, taking out your sword, and let's just say like we're going to pose with it because we don't have any battles or anything yet. So if the command is use sword, then if the inventory includes iron sword, and this is another one of those built-in methods of the arrays, is it includes. So if you provide a value here, it'll say like, okay, is this value inside of that array? And it'll return a Boolean value of true or false. If the inventory includes an iron sword, then we can say you plunge your sword into the ground, striking a heroic pose. And we can add attack because you're feeling very brave of 5. And gained 5 attack. That's cool beans, right? However, we can take it a step further. Inside of this if block, we're going to add another if block. If, let's say that if the sword is right on top of your backpack, like it was the most recent item in your inventory, that you're going to gain a defense boost because you were so fast you can like defend yourself better, right? At a moment's notice. So how do we program that logic? Well, we're going to need to do two things. We're going to need to check what item is in the last spot, and we're going to have to figure out to do that, we're going to have to figure out how many items are in the inventory, and we're going to have to talk about what an index is. So within an array, every value held within it has what's called an index that essentially tells you where that item in the array is located. So let's say we have our inventory that has a red potion and a blue potion in it. Well, this red potion and this blue potion both have an index. So it's assigned a number starting from 0, counting up by 1 for each spot. So this has an index of 0, and this has an index of 1. And if there was a third item, it'd have an index of 2, and so on. This is what's called 0 indexing. So it starts at 0 and increases. You might think it starts at 1, but it's actually 0. So then we can access the item in the first spot in our inventory, for example, by using a set of brackets here. It means we're accessing a member of that array at a particular index, and we could say index 0. So this would return the item at the first spot, which is index 0. This has an index of 0, so this would then be replaced with red potion, right? But you don't have to put a straight integer in here. You can actually put some kind of calculation. Say, like, if we had a really big inventory and we had an attack value of 10, we could pull out literally the inventory item that has the index of our attack value if we wanted to do that. We'd have to actually like account for, how much attack you could possibly have, how many inventory items you could possibly have, and so on, and we're not really going to do that. But for our purposes, we can say if inventory, and we're going to use a set of brackets to access a member of the inventory array. Use inventory.length. Notice here that this doesn't have a set of parentheses on it. It's just the word length after the dot. This is what's called a property, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. We're going to say inventory length minus 1. Why minus 1? Well, because arrays are 0 indexed, the last item in an array will always have an index equal to the length of the array minus 1. So say we had that inventory of a red potion and a blue potion. This has an index of 0, this has an index of 1. How long is this array? Well, it has a length of 2, right? So when we try to get the inventory length, we get 2, and we have to subtract 1 to get a value of 1, which is actually the index of the most recent item. Okay, so that is how we get the last item in the inventory. So if the item at the last spot of your inventory is equal to the iron sword, then we're going to tell them pulling out your sword so quickly has made you slightly faster. And we're going to add 1 to defense. And then we're going to say you're fast enough to defend yourself better. Gained 1 defense. There we go. Now let's go ahead and save this and come over to our game and reload the page. We're going to give our character a new name of Nuggets. We're not going to do any stat transfers. Now for our first item in our inventory, we're going to say 4, and then 5, and then most importantly, we want our iron sword, right? Which corresponds to the number 1. So let's add item number 1 to our inventory. And we're going to try using that use sword command. Oh, now what's this? We plunge the sword into the ground because we have it in our inventory. We gain our attack, and then it's on top of our inventory, so we are able to gain that 1 defense. Great. So now if we reload again, do this again, and we'll add the iron sword as our first item. Now we try using our sword. It doesn't actually add to our defense this time because it wasn't the most recent item in our inventory.